Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 12 new reviews just for you folks at home, 5 for me and 7 from our contributor Ian. So lots of good reviews for you folks this week, and including this week it'll be including Sigil Online Bastions, which is the third and last book in that particular series. Also, Second Chance, a Battlemage Reborn, book number 1. And then after that, it'll be Light Online, book number 1, Farmer. Then it'll be Varnoth, the Black Blade, book 2, a LitRPG story. And last but not least, from my side, it'll be Dungeon Core Academy, a LitRPG adventure. And then, of course, we're going to have quite a few reviews from Ian in Ian's Picks of the Week. But before we get into any of that, of course, we're going to go into LitRPG news. And of course, this just for folks who are watching the video version of the podcast and I look slightly different. This is for the Halloween episode that we have. We'll have a little bit of a special section on that a little bit later. But for now, into LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, gotta scroll down. We're going to begin with the story on the Game Lit Society Philanthropy Project. This is the third year running. Every year for the last couple of years, the Game Lit Society has done a fundraiser for Shriners Hospital for Children. Last year, between the author and the reader donations, we raised over $6,000. I'm always a huge supporter of anytime a group of people can put aside any of the differences they have or just use their community or support or their networking to help a good cause. And Shriners Hospital for Children is definitely one of those causes. And the LitRPG podcast, of course, supports them every single year. We have a link in the show notes. It's a GoFundMe page for the Game Society Philanthropy Project. And we did raise $6,000 last year, and hopefully we can do better this year. So definitely go there, go donate, go feel good about yourself for helping children. To pay for the hospital costs. So there you go. Okay, on to the spooktacular part of this particular episode. There we go. Spooktacular. Ghostly me hanging out. I'm a little ahead of you guys. Yeah, I know. It's a thing. I have a Halloween list of game lit and LitRPG stories that I've personally read and found creepy as heck, but very much so in line with what the holiday is. And in America, it'll be Halloween by the time most people read this particular, listen to this particular podcast on the show. So I thought I'd give it a few recommendations for spooky LitRPG stories or game stories. That includes Spirit Core series by Jonathan Brooks. He has 2 books in the series. The most recent one, Children of Fear, came out just last week. I've read Core of Fear, and it's creepy as heck. I don't personally care for scary movies, but these novels are definitely creepy for me. They combine things like Paranormal Activity or other horror movies with RPG leveling, and there's a very nice aspect of that to there. Jonathan Brooks is probably best known for a lot of his dungeon core novels, which have been really popular, but he also does this like every year for like the holiday. So definitely go check those out if you want something creepy and RPG-ish. Also, a recommendation made by Ray Johnson, The Halloween Raid, a game lit story by Jorid Sadanas. So Halloween story specifically. So there you go. He actually recommended that from the LitRPG podcast, LitRPG audiobook podcast. Also, Nightmare Game Slayers by S.R. Witt, which is a slasher film and with RPG mechanics. So there you go. I think I actually popped up the wrong one for one of the pictures here. Digital Shadows by Ethan Crow is also another one. It's a horror game that gets too real. So it's a whole series there. Also, Dark Worlds London, a Cthulhu LitRPG story by Galen Wolfe. Cthulhu Madness, again, super duper creepy as all heck. And last but not least, the 5th Survivor series, 8 books by Angel Ramon that are zombie infested survival horror game stories. So those are the recommendations for if you want some Halloween themed scary-ish LitRPG or game lit reading stuff. And hey, you got Jeff Sproul here with a special message for the LitRPG podcast listeners. Hey, Jeff Sproul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ramon?
I'm doing great, man. I hear you got a new book that is just launched. What's it called? What's it about, man?
Okay. So Sigil Online is a superhero story that takes place in a virtual reality. The main character in Sigil Online is Riley, and he finds himself in a really problematic situation where he loses his character early on, and he has to build up a new one and face the realities of an ever-changing game that directly affects his financial situation because his financial situation is directly tied with the game. And Sigil and Bastions, we have the second expansion to the game where players can go anywhere, build anything, and try to stake a claim to the actual game world itself. This creates a lot more turmoil between players. And in Bastions, the main threat is kind of like a Zerg-like entity that's constantly expanding, consuming everything in its path, along with players and their powers.
So, hey, Jeff, thanks for telling us about Sigil Online, and especially Bastion, which is the latest book in the series. I especially like Bastion for the base building, for the interesting game mechanics, and for the enemy. It was definitely one of the more trickier enemies that I've seen in your series. I had a great time with it, so thanks a lot for writing it, and we'll get back to the regular podcast. Okay, on to stuff that is out now. The stuff I haven't read, it just recently came out, and that includes Silver Peak Skyrim Online book number 2. Also, the Limitless Lands Opposition, which is the 4th book in that series. A lot of folks really enjoy this military, Romanesque kind of group combat, LitRPG stuff. People really enjoyed that one. Also, Dungeon Core Academy book number 2. We're actually reviewing book number 1 on the podcast this week. Also out now is The Card Job, a LitRPG heist. It is a sequel to a story that I enjoyed. But for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head right now. The author actually contacted the podcast today to let us know that it was out and available. For some reason, I can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me probably after I'm finished. Also, by the time most people are reading or watching the show, Warrior Academy book episode number 5, Heroes Fall, will be out for you to enjoy and read, written by Gabriel Rothwig. This is a new, very fancy cover, to be honest. I'm like, oh, that's very pretty. Much more engaging than the previous covers for the series, so maybe we'll be changing those over. And last but not least, in the new stuff for LitRPG audio ebooks is Blackthorn, Dark Judgment, book number 3, volume 3 in that saga. So there you go, all kinds of stuff for you guys to enjoy. And new LitRPG audiobooks, there's actually quite a few out this week, including The Forsaken God, which is the Realms book number 5. That is an audiobook. Core of Fear, which is a book recommended for your audiobook listening or for your scary Halloween. It's out as an audiobook as well as an ebook. Definitely go check that out. Sigil Online Bastions is out as an ebook and as an audiobook at the exact same time. So yay for you guys for Soundbooth Theater and Jeff Sproul for getting that so online. That's very challenging. And then again, that's the 3rd and final book in that particular series for now. Also out is the 3rd book in the Stations Core series, The Dungeon Guardian, a Dungeon Core epic. The 4th book in Everybody Loves Large Chest, Morgana, is out for you to listen to. The Ball of Light Evolution, written by A.R. Chen, and I believe this was produced by Blaise Corbin's production company. That is out as an audiobook. The 3rd book in the Arcane Kingdom Online series is out for you to enjoy. And Viridian Gate Online Nomad Soul Illusion is series book number 1 is out as an audiobook. So definitely go check that one out. I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed that particular side series in the Viridian Gate Online series. Also, what is an audiobook is Reborn Apocalypse book number 1. I actually reviewed book number 2 in this series. I enjoyed book number 1 personally. I've only read it. I haven't listened to the audiobook, but even I enjoyed book number 2. So it's been a good series. It's Wuxia and LitRPG. Mythian and Chronicles of Ethan, book number 1 is out as an audiobook. We reviewed the ebook version of this last week. Didn't quite work for me personally. Gave it a 6 out of 10. But if you want to give it a shot, there will be samples I'm sure to listen to. Also out as an audiobook, Polygot NPC Re-Evolution, and The Third Realms. The Third Realms, a 10 Realms tale written by Michael Chatfield. An absolutely great story. I've loved the entire series personally as an ebook, and the audiobooks are enjoyable as well. This one is actually a wide release, so it's not just an Audible exclusive. It's actually available on Amazon, Audible, audiobooks.com, which is a different company, and Apple. So plenty of places for you to get it. If you make sure you support the author on as many platforms as possible. because he's not getting the exclusivities to Audible, so he's not getting quite as much coverage and free press from them, or as much royalties. It's one of those things. So definitely go help him out if you've enjoyed his works and you like his stuff. Okay, on to upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read a bunch of stuff that's coming in the near future, so feel free to skip ahead. But we do have some new additions to this list if you want to plan out your reading schedule, or if you're an author who wants to add your story to the list. Feel free to contact us at feedback@geekbystpodcast.com. Okay, on the 1st of November, only a couple days away, it'll be the System Apocalypse Short Story Anthology Volume 1 will be out. Also on the 1st, it'll be Awaken Online Ember, which is a new, I think it's a side series called Terrat Number 1. Dark Paths, Forsaken Talents, which is the first book in this particular series. It's called Grimdark. It labels itself Grimdark LitRPG. It'll also be out on November the 1st. On November the 1st as well, it'll be Excise, a post-apocalyptic LitRPG. This is Ether Collapse book number 2. This is from Magic Books and Ryan DeBrun. On November the 4th, it'll be The Way of Deception, World of Karg book number 2. Also out on November the 4th, it'll be Raven, Player Killer, World of the Veil, book number 2, from W.D. Belfield. This is a very fast release, to be honest. It'll be out November the 6th. The second book in his series called Adapt the Scourge Wars. I enjoyed book number 1. It was called Evolve. The second book in the Interworld Network series, called Avatar of Light, will be out on November the 7th. The Divine Dungeon Anthology, which is a collection of short stories, will be out on November the 8th. It's called Essence, including a short story from one of our own people, Ray Johnson. So looking forward to reading the thing he created for this anthology. On November the 8th, it'll be The Calling of Man, a LitRPG adventure. Then November the 11th, it'll be The Last Time Loop, book number 1. On November the 14th, it'll be Delvers LLC, Surviving Ludus, Artifice Universe Collection, book number 2. Also, coincidentally, has another short story from Ray Johnson. So he's been super busy writing the short stories and getting accepted. So congrats for him. Again, that'll be out on November the 14th, which is a short story collection set in the Ludus or the Delvers LLC kind of universe. On November the 15th, it'll be Prime Universe, Force Login. On November the 15th, it'll be Dodge Everborn, book number 3 in that particular series. November 17th, this is actually a new addition to the list as well. Strangers Among Strangers, Realm of Archon, but it's not the regular Realm of Archon series. This is a side story series with a different main character called the Dark Covenant series, book number 1, so be aware of that. Arcane Online book number 4, Death March, will be out on November the 19th. Remember, you just saw that book 3 is out as an audiobook. This is book 4 as an ebook. On November 22nd, the second book in the Chronicles of Ethan series will be out, called Hard Mode. November the 30th will be Darkness Conquered, Darkness Online book number 3. December the 1st, rather, it'll be the 8th book in the System Apocalypse series, which is really a good series. I've enjoyed every single book, called Rebel Star. On December the 3rd, oddly enough, a new book in the Dream State Saga series. I was genuinely surprised to see this pop up. It's called Lost in Game, Dream State Saga book number 4. I know the author wasn't sure if his publishers were going to put out this 4th book, so it's cool to see that it's up. December the 9th, it'll be the second book in the Knockout series, called Level Up Update. On December the 13th, it'll be the third book in the Hero Online series, Quest for Justice. December the 14th, the 7th book in the Good Guys series, called The Bear Hunt. I think I already added this. Yep, November, December. Sorry, put it in 2 places at once. December the 20th, Karma's Touch, a LitRPG and Gimlet fantasy series, which is the 3rd book in the Chronicles of Ethan book series. Then December 23rd, it'll be The Wastes, Underdog book number 2. January the 9th, we're actually moving past into the new year now. January the 9th, The Destroying Plague, which is Discardium book number 3. Also, the 4th book in the Dragonheart series, called Sea of Sands, will be out on January 22nd, 2020. And the 4th book in the Hero Online series will be out on January 24th, 2020. The 3rd book in the Bad Guy series will be out on February the 6th, called Skull and Thrones. February 6, 2020. And last but not least, the 2nd book in the Invasion series, which is the it's set in the Way the Shaman universe, has a different main character though. So it's in completely separate storytelling with some cameos from old characters from the Way the Shaman series, written by Vasily Mihenko. So it is set in the Barlona universe. But again, different main characters, so different storytelling. It's called An Equation with One Unknown, Invasion book number 2. So that'll be out on February the 10th, 2020. So that's all the stuff I know that's coming out in the near future. On to new releases and reviews. Okay, first this week is going to be Sigil Online Bastions, written by Jeff Sproul. This is the third book in this series, and it's the last one for now. It is 478 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. What if the death of one game meant the death of all? A terrible entity has consumed the game known as MageWorld Online, but now that all the virtual online worlds are connected, this monstrous hive mind turns its sights to other games. It will take every power and friend that Riley can recruit to defeat this new insurmountable menace, because if he can't stop it in Sigil Online, it will consume everything in its path. Warning, this novel may cause an uncontrollable desire to play superhero MMOs. So there you go. It says Bastions is the finale to the Sigil Online trilogy. So, full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This is, again, the third book in the superhero MMO LitRPG story, and it adds some nice base building elements combined with a Zerg-like invasion. The harness requires a little bit of a suspension of disbelief with a threat coming to the superhero world from a fantasy MMO via a magical portal. The author tries to justify this by describing all these MMOs are being built in the same architectural code, thus allowing for this to occur. And honestly, I just had to do it because it bugged me. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But even just speaking to the author for a little bit, I was like, oh, okay, I understand where he's coming from theoretically. And the threat was interesting enough to kind of push past that little tiny issue with me. On the game mechanic side, the base building is a big part of the story. And it's described pretty well as an update to the new game. But I really enjoyed how the resource gathering, schematics, and 3D printers within the game kind of gave the hero side of things a kind of sci-fi vibe, and how they upgraded their buildings and produced minions to like defend the base and everything. That was kind of neat. And it was kind of a distinct contrast to how the other entity, the Zerg-like entity, created their bases and created their minions, which is a lot more organic, with excretions and drones and a hive mind and taking over and copying other elements. So it was a nice little contrast there. Is still some RPG aggression in here with some new equipment, newly borrowed powers, and upgraded abilities. So all that stuff is there. This series on the whole has always been a little lighter on that aspect, though. Overall, though, this is a pretty good expansion of a series that I've already enjoyed, and it ends in an interesting place that serves as a place to pause the series, or to leave room for some very new stories. For me, I had a good time reading it. That's generally what I look for in a LitRPG story, that I had a good time, and I did have a good time. I've usually enjoyed this series, mostly because it's a little bit different in that it does do superhero stuff, and there aren't a lot of stories that, even though there are MMOs, MMORPGs with superhero themes, they're quite a good few popular ones. So I was always surprised that nobody ever took that up in this direction. So this is one of the few, and I always enjoy it. So for me, it gets a score of 7.5 out of 10, a real solid middle of the road kind of enjoyment. That's Sigil Online Bastions with a score of 7.5 out of 10. And next we have Second Chance, a Battlemage Reborn, book number 1, an EndWorld Everlasting Saga, written by R. Brady Frost. Okay, this is 549 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. What if you can guarantee life after death? Denton Wade is dying. A Cyberternal Industries has the answer. An answer he isn't willing to accept. Life everlasting in a game world of fantasy, swords, and magic. EndWorld Everlasting, a man-made afterlife that goes against everything he's always believed in. But there might still be hope, and hope is a very dangerous thing. Far below their headquarters in Dallas, Texas, Cyber Eternal has been working on a secret medical program, a program made available to Denton through his personal, if not complicated, connection to an assistant vice president at the powerful company. After agreeing to undergo the procedure, Denton finds himself awakened in a strange new world, a world he never wanted. So there we go. This is a digital afterlife story with RPG mechanics. It is, but it also kind of has this very fantasy-esque kind of plot, which was not enjoyable for me. I'll be frank and say that I just didn't enjoy this novel. A big part of me that has to do with the opening. It kind of just wasn't enjoyable for me, and that definitely tainted some of the rest of the book, so that it was really always hard for me to kind of get back into that space of enjoyment. The story starts out with an overly long, and again, this is personal opinion, overly long and emotional section where the main character, who's a dying old man, is supposed to get treated by an experimental nanite treatment at the request of his daughter, who is essentially emotionally manipulating him. All the while, he hints heavily that he doesn't trust either the tech or the guy running the company. And of course, then something goes wrong, and he dies and is uploaded to an MMO afterlife that the company runs. The main character refuses to stay there, but more emotional manipulation makes him go in and fully upload. Honestly, the entire section is probably going to work for a lot of readers. Like, I'm not saying it's badly written. There are definitely a lot of like heartstrings that are pulled and tears that are jerked out. But I didn't like it. Because I recognize it as emotional manipulation at the same time as a literature reader. I didn't care about how he got into the game world. I generally don't. Like some authors feel like there has to be some real justification of why somebody would upload their mind. And for me, it's always been like, I don't care. This is just fun. I would, so, it was, I was always waiting for the good stuff to start, the RPG stuff, the stuff that I kind of came for. And so the fact that it went on for such a long period, it felt long, I should say. I also knew, of course, that from the first paragraph of the novel, that he was going to upload. Otherwise, there was not going to be a story here. So the entire time, I just wished for it to end and to get into the actual Liberty story. From there, the main character is magically saved by wolves and meets plenty of new players. He then gets tricked, and then saved magically. Well, not magic, but he does get saved, and acquires a powerful sentient magic sword, all while he's level 1. And this really bugged me. I always just like when main characters get these powers and these abilities or these items that are overpowered for the level without actually having to work for anything. And this is where it kind of, for me, starts to lean into that fantasy kind of plotting, where the main character is a chosen one and he gets this sword who's sentient and is judging him, and it becomes like this magic kind of MacGuffin to get him out of some situation sometimes. And it definitely feels like this plot issue in this story, and it kind of happens over and over in the story, where there are just these elements where the main character gains powers or regains abilities or items that work as plot devices to save him or to move the plot forward, and he doesn't earn them. He's literally on multiple occasions kind of given these things to save him, especially towards the end. I'm like, oh, that's a very fantasy-ish kind of plotting, and that's perfectly fine if that's what you enjoy. No judgment for me. But in LitRPG, one of the things I've always loved about the genre is the fact that everything kind of ties into the RPG mechanics, and those things definitely did not. They had no place within the RPG system whatsoever. It felt very much like this I want to say cyberpunk or like fantasy-esque kind of plotting, where these items and these things didn't really belong in this kind of MMO world. Now, outside of those plot points, there is some relatively decent XP grinding and questing, but nothing that was really, I want to say, original. It's stuff I've seen before. It's, you're fighting spiders, you're fighting wolves, you're fighting rats, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, it's not bad, but I'm like, I've definitely read this kind of stuff. It didn't feel very fresh or interesting to me. And of course, I understand totally that the main character is written in a certain manner, so that at the beginning of the story, he has these flaws that he can kind of get over towards the middle and end of the story. But because of that beginning where I just didn't care about it, or I just didn't enjoy it, it kind of perpetuated the fact that I didn't like the main character. It always felt in the story, and this is kind of also said in other reviews for the novel, that the main character is annoying, and they always complain about not really wanting to be in the story. And even in the novel description, it kind of says that he never intended to upload his mind to this, to this digital afterlife situation. And he says in the story again and again and again that that's the case, that he doesn't really want to be there, but he's there for, for his children in some way or shape or form. And because I always felt like he didn't want to be there, I didn't want to be there with him. And that was always an issue for me in that. So, and the fact that the story kind of makes him a hero, even though he doesn't want to be a hero, was always something that I didn't enjoy. So there we go. So, besides those things, though, like I said, those were issues for me personally. So if those aren't issues for you, you probably enjoy this. You wait. I did not, though. Overall, again, the writing isn't bad. The combat's kind of meh. Especially in the beginning and mid parts of the story where he's kind of grinding for XP in ways that I was like, okay, you're killing rabbits and spiders. And I'm like, okay, I think we've seen that before. It felt a little tropey and predictable. And ultimately, I just didn't enjoy or care about the main character. And again, I don't hate the story in any way, shape, or form, and I recognize that other people enjoy it, and that's perfectly cool. You might enjoy it too. Definitely go read a sample before you make a judgment. But it just didn't do it for me, and I kind of had to force myself to finish the novel. So for me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's Second Chance, a Battlemage Reborn, book number 1, an EndWorld Everlasting Saga with a score of 6 out of 10. And next we have Light Online, book number 1, Farmer, written by Ton Larcombe. It is 415 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Eddie Hunter is about at the end of his rope, so when he stumbles across an ad looking for people to farm in long-term immersion in the game Light Online, he can't believe his own luck. Once hired, he enters the game as soon as he can. Unbeknownst to him, though, the person that hired him is also doing illicit research on the pods that he and the other farmers are using. The research is rapidly discovered by the AI that monitors the game and shut down forcibly. But the company that runs Light Online, that runs Light Online. But the code that runs those pods has been altered, and until it's fixed, Eddie and the others can't log out. Although the devs assure him that it won't take long to fix, Eddie's not so sure of that himself. Eddie entered the game to make money in real life, and as he tries to do that, he finds himself getting entangled deeper and deeper in the game with the people he meets there. But when he discovers a side game that his previous players had apparently never even considered, he knows he has to find a way to stay in the game. So there you go. That's pretty accurate. That kind of describes the beginning to mid sections of the plotline. This is an easy review. It's a decent it's a decent story with crafting, farming, cooking, and sim building. And those are kind of the more enjoyable aspects of the story. There is some adventure stuff in there, but it's fairly standard. It's nothing kind of special. The folks that like crafting are probably going to like the story a lot. There's also this minor hacking cyber element. It doesn't really do much for the story. It kind of adds a little bit of flavor and breaks up some of the game stuff by taking the story outside of the MMO universe and looking at devs and other issues in the world. It's just kind of like a break from that crafting and XP running sections of the story. And it was enjoyable. I like the crafting, but I'm also someone who enjoys crafting LitRPG stories quite a bit. For me, it gets a score of 7.3 out of 10. Light Online book number 1, Farmer. If you like crafting, you're probably going to enjoy this because it does also have like a farming, cooking, and a little bit of town building, but mostly it's the crafting stuff that you're going to enjoy. Okay, next up is Varnoth, the Black Blade, book number 2, written by Lavelle Jackson. This is the second book in the series. It is 331 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here is the author's description. This Catman isn't all that cute and cuddly. Varnoth's journey through the lush fantasy world of Albatrar continues. After the defeat of the derelicts gang Vile, crime boss Atlas Blackthorn, all seems well for the countryside. However, a horrific event occurs that forces the Shadow Panther to lead a massive group of diverse refugees as they search desperately for a safe haven. Varnoth will battle ghastly monsters and adventure on fascinating quest as he grows into one of the most powerful heroes in all the land. This time around, Varnoth is not alone. There are new and unique side characters that join the fight alongside the legendary Black Blade. Will this power be enough to when retribution knocks on Varnoth's door? Will the Shadow Panther be able to keep his people safe? An army of monsters led by a depraved, bloodthirsty tyrant will test Varnoth's bravery and skill. Will the Shadow Panther be able to prevent the slaughter of the very people he swore to protect? So there you go. That's a novel description. Full disclosure, I received an advanced copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. This is the second book in the series, and it still has a lot of the issues that I had with book one, especially in the RPG side. But my expectations for this novel were better managed. And while I tried really hard to like this story, I did. Sorry, author. Sorry, Lavelle. It was just a miss for me, and that's unfortunate. Again, I know that there are people who enjoy this novel, and feel free. If you like book one, you're going to like book two. You will. It has all the same things people enjoyed, although it's not as intense or focused plot wise. But I'll get into that. The novel starts off well enough with good action, which is great. The action is probably the highlight of the story in the series. I've never had an issue with the action whatsoever. It gets a little gory sometimes, but very well described. The main character continues to be overpowered and rarely in any real danger of ever losing. The only aspect here that I've always kind of had with the story is that the fact that the overpowered aspect doesn't really match the RPG element. It's never really justified in the story why he's so overpowered, why he always seems to win despite whatever odds he's faced against, or if he might suddenly like almost lose, but in the RPG aspect of it, it's never really justified in that. In those situations, like the main character just doesn't look at the opponent's level. There's no level justification for it, or there's no like real comparison of RPG characteristics. Even though you get statutes on a regular basis, there's no comparison for the information, so it doesn't really mean a lot. So again, that's what I mean by this. It's not really justified on the RPG side of things. However, I knew that going into this novel, so that wasn't as big as an issue for me this time as it was in the previous novel. And that's just because I knew about it. I knew it was going to happen. So I just kind of put in my brain, ignore that aspect of it and continue on. And it really wasn't a big issue for me. I enjoyed the nods that the author had for some of the people in the LitRPG community, whether the members or authors or friends or whatever the case is. And my favorite being, of course, John, son of Ray. I enjoyed that little nod to one of our LitRPG podcast family members. The story itself, however, continues to be action adventure. Very much a slice of life story this time. There are some added town building elements. The main character helps some people, gruesomely kills some bad guys. There is no real plot here. There are some main characters, a bit of town building, some quests, fighting, and a bit of leveling, and an actiony end. I'm really going to describe this as slice of life just because in book one, the main character kind of had a goal. He shows at the beginning of that novel without a memory of who he is. And so part of his goal is figuring out why he exists, what his powers are, getting a class, and kind of figuring out the mystery of who his past self was. And that doesn't exist here. There's no real point. There's no plot in that respect. You do get a threat about midway to late in the story where there's a very, I don't want to say similar threat from a bad group like you saw in book one. However, this new group isn't nearly as bad as the first one. And again, it kind of just serves as a mid to late opponent for the main character kind of overcome. So even in that respect, it's not really super intense until like the end of the story. Dialogue is probably one of the aspects that kind of turned me off on this story. It's sometimes kind of funny, like there are definitely funny moments, but mostly the dialogue felt stilted and kind of forced. And sometimes it just didn't make sense in like this super brutal, gory, killer bee guild kind of world. Characters were very polarized in that they're either really, really good and spoke politely and called the main character my friend a lot for some reason, even though they might have just met him, or I've had very few interactions with them. Or they were like super evil and they cursed a lot. And that was kind of the way you could tell whether somebody was going to be a good guy or bad guy was how if they cursed or were super polite. And all the characters kind of fell into these two little molds. And it was just like very diametric in that there was no middle ground. There were no complex characters. A lot of the characters are very flat. They're just evil or they're just good. And there's not a lot of depth to characters, not a lot of like complicated backstories or questioning of why people are doing these things. Even the main character was very much more on like the deadly do right kind of side of things a lot of times, except for when he was getting gory and murdering bad guys. And So it's like that was kind of a more of a writing issue, and that the characters just weren't interesting to me. And again, that is me. It's just hard for me to connect with these particular characters, unfortunately. And so again, I tried to manage my expectations, and I ignored the overpowered issues. That was not an issue for me this time as much, because I knew what I was getting into, so I accepted it. However, the other issues, I just couldn't connect with the characters enough to care about them or find them interesting, or be super interested in the story and like how they developed. So the story didn't really work for me, and neither did the characters, and those are just aspects I couldn't find myself enjoying. So for me, the story didn't really work. It gets a 6 out of 10 for me, but again, go check it out. Go form your own opinions. I know people have enjoyed this series, so if you liked book number 1, you're probably gonna like book number 2. It's just that I didn't, and so it was always going to be a challenge for me to get into this book, and I just didn't, unfortunately. So Varnoth the Black Blade, book number 2, gets a score of 6 out of 10. Okay. Next is Dungeon Academy by Alex Oakchest. It is 159 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, and here is the author's description. You only live once, unless you're resurrected to become the master of a dungeon. When Benno died and was offered a second chance as the Dungeon Corps, he dived right in. He joined the Dungeon Corps Academy and found himself in a new life where killing heroes wasn't just accepted, but encouraged. Under the tutelage of the Academy overseers, he learned how to make dungeons filled with monsters and traps. Now he has finally been given his own dungeon, and he must pass his final test. Either build a dungeon powerful enough to slay heroes, or fail and get smashed up into core dust. Will he apply all his diabolical dungeon strategy to succeed? But what happens when an unexpected visitor walks into his lair? He used to live a normal life. Now he builds dungeons, creates monsters, and uses them to fight loot-hungry heroes. This is actually a cute story. The first 20% is a little traditional in that it's just a dungeon core kind of talking to himself and the audience. And it's a lot of stuff. If you've liked Dungeon Core stories, you're going to see a lot of familiar things, and how he's figuring out how to use his mana efficiently, starting out and taking risks and planning things out. And he's kind of describing the things he learned in the Dungeon Academy that he used to attend. The story is told from the perspective of a Dungeon Core who went to an academy and is now an actual official dungeon and is allowed to design his own kind of system, but he also still has to answer to his Dungeon Academy professors who are going to be judging him and either giving him bonuses or boosts or detriments, depending on how they kind of judge his dungeon. And the first 20% is a lot of monologuing from the main character. So it's a little hard to get through initially, but even then it wasn't boring or anything. It's just like, oh, a lot of the same character talking. Then about the 30% mark, things shift for the better, because you get introductions to new characters, you get minions, you get a little human girl who used to be a Dungeon Core as a character. You get more interaction, and so the main character has an opportunity to talk to their people, other characters, to make jokes, to make references, and the dialogue definitely improves. And it was just overall just a much more enjoyable, cute story, and I really enjoyed it a lot more after that 30% mark. So if you find yourself struggling a little bit, just kind of try to push through at least to that point to give it a shot of when it does improve a lot in that respect. But from then on, the story is actually really fun. It's pretty fun, I should say. The main character tries to balance his experiments and his dungeon creating with crafting his dungeon, dealing with the Academy overseers judging him, and the adventures that eventually come through. It's a good story if you like Dungeon Core novels. If you don't like Dungeon Core novels, I don't see this being as interesting to you, but if you do, this is definitely going to be something that feels good, because it kind of combines Dungeon Core, the Dungeon Core stuff, with kind of a magical academy vibe, in that the main character is often referencing the things he learned at the Dungeon Core Academy, and his interactions with other Dungeon Cores, the things he learns, the lessons, the magical traits, and there's the story kind of peripherally refers to it a lot. So I enjoyed it. I had to give it a score of 7.6 out of 10. That's Dungeon Core Academy with a score of 7.6 out of 10. But again, I like Dungeon Core novels, so that's why I enjoyed it quite a bit. Okay, on to Ian's Picks of the Week. This is a segment where contributor Ian Mitchell, a longtime Canadian member, he reads and reviews as much as I do, and he was nice enough to contribute to the podcast. some of the reviews that he's done. And he's specifically, these last couple weeks, kind of gone through the back catalog of stuff that we may have missed and pushed his reviews and collected them for us to add to our LitRPG database and also to the show, but also new stuff. So we'll get into those immediately. And that's going to include, his first review is going to be Dragonheart, Stone Will, LitRPG Wuxia series. I've wanted to read this for quite a while. It's just that I can't read book 3 if I haven't read book 1. And so I missed book 1, and when I missed a book and I don't get back to it, I have such a long backlist of stories that it's hard for me to catch up. So I'm always glad that Ian has done this, to be honest, because it gives you guys a chance to see what books are good, even though I try to read them as I can. I can't read everything. And so this is Ian's review. Sorry, Ian. It's he gives it a score of 8.5 out of 10. He says, first off, I really like the interior illustrations. I found the beginning a bit odd since once the story got really going, I found it read like a martial arts buddy flick with a lot of over-top action. Very enjoyable with great translation, a very different feel from the Asian wuxia, but I liked the difference. Very glad to hear that there are many volumes in the pipeline. Great read. So that was his original review when the first book came out. He also goes on to review the second book in this particular series called Dragonheart Iron Will. And he gives it an 8.4 out of 10. He enjoyed it even more. A little bit less, I should say. He says, I really love the larger-than-life main character. While it has a complete arc, the book reads like a compilation of stories and even fables. The interior illustrations really add to my experience. I got a kick out of the War Council's astonishment at their general's increasingly audacious plans. The stories were engrossing, and I did have difficulty with the scenes where Hajar and Nero were wading into large-scale battles. My ability to imagine these scenes wasn't up to the task, and in some places, actions and results seemed inconsistent. As far as I could tell, the translation and editing were excellent. I read about half of this volume on the Royal Road website. Great reading. I think it adds a lot to the genre. And then he goes on to review the third book in this series, which was more recently came out, called Dragonheart Blood Will. He gives it an 8.8 out of 10, which is the best score he gave for the series so far. He says, I love how the main character, as the Mad General, is the source of ballads and legends. A very moving book with many surprises. I didn't see them coming. The world feels a lot more real to me than most of the Asian wuxia. The illustrations are a great part of the series. And again, calls it epic, and it says 8.8 out of 10. So there we go. He's reviewed all the books in that series so far, and we'll have the fourth book in that series coming up in the near future. He goes on to review more books for us this week, including Battle Avatars, a Game League Zantia. Battle Avatars book number 1, written by Ed White. It gives it a score of 7.2 out of 10. He says, very mysterious and a bit of a slow starter. I felt like it was hitting its stride by the end of this book. I left with questions. Is it a game? Is it another world? Are they accessing parts of our world that people don't normally get to? Is David going to hook up with Lisa? Reminded me of some of the Endless Online. It had a decent time reading it. I look forward to reading book number 2. So he kind of says this is a decent read. So there we go. He also reviewed, let's see. Here we go. Morgana, Everybody Loves Large Chests, Volume 4. I kind of pieced out, I believe it was in book 3 when there was some rape stuff. And so that was like, oh, definitely a series killer for me. But a lot of people have continued on with the story and really enjoyed it. No judgment for me. We all have different issues. Written by Nevin Evil for the Everybody Loves Large Chess series. And gives it a score of 9.2 out of 10. He says, Boxy T. Morningwood is one of my favorite characters. I started out reading these on the Royal Road. Boxy and the crew are a guilty pleasure. I love the monstrous mayhem. The ravenous mimic is growing up, learning how to pass as a person in society. Rereading this was a whole lot of fun. Might not be suitable for squeamish or people that need nice heroes. Boxy saves in case it's hungry later. So there you go. And those were all very true statements. He also reviewed this week. Ian reviewed Anime Troop System Stoner vs. Viper number 12. He gives it a 7.9 out of 10. He says, easy review. Great fast read. I love anime. It's hard to give the harem members enough page time. Well edited, silly pulp anime themed harem lit RPG. Simple. And the last book that he gave me a review for this week is Cold Blooded, written by Blaze Corbin and Outspan Foster. Now this one is more the author self-describes this as a more of a game-lit story, a battle royale game-lit story. So be aware of that. Ian gives it an 8.3 out of 10, which is better than his 7s. He says, more Dolos, more fun, yay! Well, this was mostly less splorply than the Battle Royale movie. Fast and simple, a quick 2-hour read, Hunger Games, Dolos style. More fun than 2 hours playing Minecraft. Less thrilling than the last Mad Max movie. I thought it was a wonderful use of 2 hours. Go finish the next Delvers LLC book, please. Which we all agree with, I think. All of the fans of the Delvers LLC universe are definitely in line with that opinion. And that's, there you go. So those are the reviews for Ian's picks this week. And that's it, folks. That's the end of our episode. It's a Halloween-ish kind of episode where I appear a little ghostly every year. I'm just wearing a green shirt with my green screen, so I get to be headless and armless-ish. I'm the ghostly LitRPG podcaster. But thank you for listening, for hanging out with me this week, ladies and gentlemen. If you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and our webpage. We'll have links in the show notes for all those places. But basically, go find us whatever social media you have. We're probably there. We regularly post about the reviews and our weekly podcast. So if you want to catch us every week without having to go look for us or search for us, you can go to this place. We also have our website at litrpgpodcast.com, where we have a whole huge, long, concrete database of over 900 LitRPG reviews that we've personally read and actually have experience and opinions on. You can find a whole bunch of stuff, a whole back catalog of things to read if you're just getting LitRPG, or if you've been here for a while and you want to see if there's some older stuff that you might have missed. We have a whole list of stuff, including tags for all the things you can think of: base building, space, female protagonists, female authors, or whatever the case is, action, adventure, dungeon core, wherever you want. You can go to our recommendation section and look in our search box, and you can type in what you want, and you can find a whole host of stuff. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us this week, ladies and gentlemen. And remember, if you want to support us, you can find us all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But again, until we can hang out again, folks, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.